5 days after the explosion, scientists calculated that if nothing was done, half of Europe would be uninhabitable for 500 years. Someone had to go in. 3 men raised their hands. By May 1, 1986, the visible catastrophe at reactor number 4 was clear. The explosion had torn the building apart, and emergency crews were already fighting the exposed fires on the surface. But beneath the wreckage, a secondary threat was developing. The nuclear fuel inside the core was still burning, melting down into a slow-moving, intensely hot mass called corium, and eating its way through the concrete floors. This schematic shows the layout beneath the reactor floor. Directly beneath the descending corium sat a massive pool, holding 1,500 tons of water. If that molten corium breaches the ceiling and drops into the flooded pool, rapid vaporization will trigger a massive steam explosion. Calculations showed a blast of that magnitude would obliterate the 3 remaining reactors at the Chernobyl plant. It would launch a second radioactive cloud, dwarfing the initial disaster. To prevent this, the water had to be drained manually from inside the basement. Alexei Ananenko, Valeri Bespalov, and Boris Baranov volunteered. They were senior engineers and plant supervisors who knew the internal layout of the facility, and more importantly, they knew exactly where the drainage valves were located. Popular culture often depicts them swimming through the facility in heavy scuba gear. The reality was much more pragmatic. They wore rubberized military chemical protection suits over their standard white uniforms, expecting the water levels to be low enough to wade through. They carried only the bare essentials: standard respirators, 2 dosimeters strapped to their chests and ankles, a single pipe wrench, and 1 flashlight. They were engineers, not soldiers following orders. They approached a highly calculated, lethal environment, relying strictly on their intellect, the facility blueprints, and a few basic hand tools. To minimize their exposure to the extreme radiation outside the damaged building, they mapped a route through the plant's internal golden corridor, keeping concrete shielding between them and the destroyed core for as long as possible. Eventually, they reached the end of the shielded path. To access the basement, they had to cross the plant's massive, heavily compromised transport corridor. Moving quickly, they sprinted across the space, passing directly by a gigantic black cone of highly radioactive, exposed reactor debris that had collapsed from above. The environment was viscerally toxic. The intense ionizing radiation affected the air and moisture around them, leaving a distinct, sharp metallic taste of liquid radiolysis in their mouths as they breathed. Their dosimeters instantly spiked completely off the scale. With the meters rendered useless, they pushed forward, descending the stairwell into the absolute, unlit unknown of the lower levels. They entered room 001/3. The space was pitch black, and the floor was flooded with knee-deep, murky, highly radioactive water. To avoid wading directly through the highest concentrations of contamination, they balanced along the top of a large, submerged pipe running the length of the floor. They had to navigate a dense maze of pipes, cables, and industrial machinery. They relied exclusively on Ananenko's memory of the facility's blueprints, guided only by the narrow beam of Baranov's flashlight. In the darkness, the flashlight beam caught a familiar piece of hardware. They had found the exact sluice gate valves they were looking for, still bearing their original metal labels. They turned the wheels. The valves weren't jammed. Almost immediately, the heavy rushing sound of 1,500 tons of water draining through the pipes echoed through the room. The secondary explosion had been averted. With the pool draining, the 3 engineers retraced their steps, waded out of the dark basement, and returned to the relative safety of the control room. For decades, a legend circulated that these men succumbed to acute radiation sickness, dying agonizing deaths in hospital beds within days of the mission. The story usually claims their bodies were so heavily irradiated that they had to be buried in specially fabricated lead coffins. But that tragic martyrdom simply did not happen. In reality, Ananenko and Bespalov survived the disaster. They continued their careers in the nuclear energy sector, working in the industry for decades after the event. Baranov also survived the immediate aftermath. He lived another 19 years, continuing his work at the Chernobyl plant until his passing in 2005. They survived because they executed the operation with absolute precision. Their deep knowledge of the plant's hazards allowed them to move quickly, minimize their exposure, and complete the mechanical task efficiently. They fully understood the apocalyptic stakes, and they consciously chose to walk into the radioactive dark. They went down to do the quiet, mechanical work that needed to be done. Their legacy is not a mythical death, but a quiet, lived reality. Their competence in the dark spared the continent.